One thing I want to emphasize to you all, you have this opportunity today to really, get some really powerful information that I personally believe can impact you for your entire life. Okay, and not only impact you, but maybe even, how you raise your families and how you view nutrition. It's that big of a deal to me. Okay, so don't be afraid to ask. Kelsey's very, very welcoming. Let's give her a nice little soft round of applause for Kelsey Bartlow. Okay.
Thank you. So I'm here today for a couple of reasons, and I'm qualified because I have a Bachelor's of Science in Nutrition and Dietetics. I also have a Master of Public Health degree. So informally, basically since I got my bachelor's degree in 2017, I've kind of been like the free nutritionist to my friends and family. So informally, that's kind of what I've been doing. Formally, though, I did spend 2 years coordinating the WIC program. Anyone familiar with the health department here in town? So I worked there for 2 years coordinating the WIC program, Women, Infant, and Children's program, and I also provided nutrition counseling to pregnant women, women who had just recently delivered their babies, and also their children up to the age of 5. Okay, so I want to tell you a little bit about what we're going to talk about today. So we'll just talk about nutrition basics. And I meant to say too, if at any time you have questions or I'm a little bit unclear, feel free to raise your hand. Happy to ask questions. Mr. Mateer is going to let me know when we have 5 minutes left, and I'm going to just cut it off and make sure I can answer any questions that may have come up for you too. Then I want to talk about, is there a connection between the way we feel and the way we eat? And that's going to kind of lead into fueling for performance. So that's not just, if you're in sports, it's definitely going to impact your sport performance, but also you don't feel too great if you skip breakfast and you got a test that morning, right? Or maybe you're just kind of hangry. I get hangry. So we'll talk a little bit about what that connection can look like. Who's seen this before? Okay, awesome, most of you. Anyone remember my pyramid? So what this came from is that the U.S. Department of Agriculture and the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services every 5 years, so federal government agencies, they came together every 5 years and decided that they were going to look at Americans' diets and see how can we improve. So what they came up with were the dietary guidelines. So right now the dietary guidelines are going to go through 2025 or so, and they'll come out with some new ones. And it's a really, really long document, really thick, and it's kind of geared towards like doctors, dietitians, and like health professionals in the field. But what they made also is like they realized this is not easy to understand. So what they came out with was My Plate. So this is the consumer translation of those dietary guidelines. And so we're gonna break it down as to what this means. So who's heard of macronutrients and micronutrients? Also, who came to the session last week? Anyone? You saw part of it? Okay, so hopefully you all will have the answers for me today, right? So who can tell me what the macronutrients are? Yeah, so you're talking about these here, like the fats, proteins, and carbohydrates. Awesome. So then the micronutrients are our vitamins and minerals. Okay, so we measure these in grams, and we measure these in like micrograms or milligrams. So you need a lot of these, so you need more carbohydrates, more protein, and more fats than you need of these vitamins and minerals. What are some examples of vitamins? Yeah. Anyone else? So we got vitamins A, D, E, and K, and those are fat soluble. And we have the B and C vitamins, and those are water soluble. And I'll talk a little bit about what that means on the next slide. Minerals, we've got like calcium, magnesium, phosphorus. So those you just need really, really small amounts, okay? So when we look at how do things digest, and this is going to be really important when we learn about fueling for performance, what we know is that carbohydrates digest the fastest. So on a spectrum, these are going to digest the fastest, and then fats are going to digest the slowest. So carbohydrates are, let's see, I'm going to actually go back one slide because I think, okay. So we'll get to this. We'll talk a little bit more about this. So carbohydrates. These are broken down into simple and complex carbohydrates, okay? So your simple carbohydrates are gonna be like the maple syrup that you put on your pancakes, the honey that I put in my latte, right? So they're really simple. And also fruits, okay? Fruits have a little bit of fiber in them, but they still digest really quick. Complex carbohydrates, so what would those be? Anyone know? So those are gonna be like your pastas, your starches, so like potatoes, grains, and even vegetables. So they tend to have a little bit more fiber and they've got starch in them. So if I like eat a teaspoon of honey, that's gonna digest a lot faster than if I have a slice of bread. They're still gonna digest pretty quickly, but that bread's gonna take a little bit longer in our stomach, okay? Then we have protein. When you're eating protein, the biggest factor in how long that's gonna take to digest is gonna be how much fat's in it. So whey protein, we familiar with whey protein? It's like that protein shake. That's gonna digest really quickly compared to like an egg or even like a chicken breast, okay? So even then you've got like some variability. Now also proteins like your red meats, those have a lot more fat in them, okay? So those are gonna take even longer than that egg and that whey protein, okay? And then fats. Fats they just kind of like sit in your stomach. Have you ever had like fried food and then tried to like exercise afterwards, or even a few hours later, just kind of like sits in like a brick in your stomach? You're like, ugh. So fats take a lot longer to digest, okay? So there's ways that we can pair these together to make sure that you have enough fuel for your body, but you're also not gonna just like burn through that fuel.
So
okay?
why, and I'm kind of talking to some of our performance type people, why would rate of digestion be important for us to pay attention to for, let's say, a game? Why? Energy, right? So if I consume something that is a simple carbohydrate prior to, let's say, a cross-country run, a football game per se, what's going to be the problem with a simple carbohydrate versus a more complex carbohydrate? Right. Absolutely, absolutely correct.
Midway through that meat, you're just going to run out of fuel.
Just so everybody heard him correctly, and I want to paraphrase. Simple, if I ingest simple prior to, I'm going to burn that up quicker. Versus when I need that energy draw, if I would have had a complex carbohydrate, probably going to be able to draw more stuff from that. Does that make sense? Okay.
And
Sorry,
I don't
Kelsey.
think, no, that's awesome. And I don't think I said this. So do you know what your brain actually needs to function? Because this applies to like if you have that test later today, if you got to be in school for 8 hours like you all. Okay, so what does your brain run on? What's that? Food? What specifically? What part of food? Carbohydrates. So your brain needs those carbohydrates to function. You also need those because your skeletal muscles, so all the muscles that are like attached to your bones, like your quads, your hamstrings, everything's going to help you run in football, in cross country, even in volleyball. It's all running on carbohydrates. Okay? If you don't have enough carbohydrates, your body will break down other parts of you to create carbohydrates. So
how many of you really feel like foggy in the afternoon, like brain fog? Okay, all right? Okay.
You might need a little snacky snack.
I'll ask a follow-up question. How many of you make it an active habit to get a snack, like, you know, sometime, maybe mid-morning, maybe right at post, maybe like a little bit after lunch? Okay, that's good, because especially some of you might have more difficult academic classes in the afternoon when you really got to be able to think. You know, maybe that snack is not a bad idea in terms of like helping your mental performance as well. Okay? To me, performance is performance. It doesn't just have to be physical. It's a lot mental too. They actually are blended together if you think about it at a high level. So, important to know. Very important.
And you'll even see in your handout, so there's the PowerPoint slides, and then there's an actual handout that just has more information that I won't go too much in depth today. In that handout, it says for your age group, you literally need about 3 meals and a couple snacks a day, which for some of you who may not be used to eating that amount, you're growing, right? Your brains are still forming, your bodies are still growing, so you really do need all those nutrients. So going back to my plate, we saw carbohydrates, proteins, and fats on the last slide, right? I don't see carbohydrates on this slide. Where are they? Grains, yes. And? Fruits, and? Yes, vegetables. And even in that chicken that you're eating, there are still a little bit of carbohydrates in there. There's just not as much. Okay, so then we saw protein on the last slide. Where are the fats? Yes, and?
Where
and
else?
in the protein?
Yeah.
Yes. Now, anyone like avocados? A little bit, kind of.
Fan.
And you're like,
guacamole. Fan.
yeah, guac. Okay, that changed everything. So avocados are actually really high in fat too, and they're actually classified as a fruit. So most foods you eat are going to have all of those macronutrients in them, but you just need more of certain of them, right? Because you can see most of your plate is carbohydrates, right? Okay, and then you do need quite a bit of protein. Now, I do have, for those of you who remember this presentation last time, I kind of have a bone to pick with my plate. Okay. So we know that dairy has vitamin D in it, right, and has calcium, so it's a really good source of those two nutrients. Do you know what else we can find vitamin D in? In the sun, yeah, what else? Anyone like mushrooms? Yeah. Anyone seen like their orange juice at home and it says fortified? It's got vitamin D in it too. Yeah. So dairy is a really great source of protein, calcium, and vitamin D, but you don't have to have dairy, okay, to fill your plate up. There's non-dairy products like there's soy milk, there's almond milk, so there's lots of non-dairy options for any of you who just don't like milk or actually can't eat it, okay? Any vegetarians in here? Anyone who's like just not a fan of meat? Kinda? So I'm gonna speak to this a little bit. So I'm a vegetarian. I don't eat animal protein, so I'm not eating like chicken. I'm usually not eating fish. So how am I gonna get protein? What's that? Rice? And what can we pair that with? Beans, yes. So he said you can pair rice and beans together, okay? And that'll make a complete protein. So protein is made of amino acids, and different protein foods have different amino acids in them. But it turns out that when you combine rice and beans together, you get all 9 of the essential amino acids that your body needs and it can't make. So that's why I'm not withering away, is because I eat rice and beans. What other options? Anyone know? What's that? What if I don't eat dairy? No way for me. What's that? So what I'll usually do is I can also combine grains with legumes and nuts. So peanut butter and jelly is a complete protein. So that PB&J is basically the same thing as eating a chicken sandwich. Okay, so that's why I'm not withering away. So just different ways to think about how you can get protein in.
Who's heard of tofu? Tofu's high in protein.
Anyone like tofu? If I cooked it for you, I bet you would. You got to cook it right. What's that? Yeah. Yeah, I'll do that for you, just for you. Okay. So really I just have this slide up here just because I want you to know, like, what is the definition of a calorie, okay? But really how I want you to think of calories, because you know when you look at your food labels, it shows how many calories there are and all the other nutrients. Just know that calories are just telling you how much energy you're going to be able to get from that food item, okay? So I'm curious, who is, when I say the word like diet culture, what comes to mind for you all? Yeah, right? What are diets that you've heard of? Well, did anyone hear that? He said losing weight. Is that what you think of when you hear of like diet culture? It's usually like, how can we lose weight? How can we like make ourselves smaller? So what are diets that you've heard of? Keto, yep. Do you know what keto is? Anyone know what keto is? So you're not eating any carbohydrates. You know how I said when you don't have carbohydrates, your body's going to find a way to get those? So it's going to break down fats and proteins in your body, and it's going to produce ketones. And the point is to put your body into ketosis. So that's why it's called keto. Does that sound like fun? Your body's got to like break protein and fats down. You can have a lot of symptoms from that. So I'm not recommending that. Please don't. So there's keto. What else have we heard of? Have we heard
carnivore.
Of paleo? You heard of paleo? Have you seen like on social media like the tea diets or the tea fasts or the shakes? Yeah, all liquid, like the juice cleanses. So we've all heard of those, right? Okay. So in America, and I really just want to designate this slide to this, so in America, we're really hyper diet culture focused, and it's really weird. And what I want you to know is that even if maybe, and at this age, you really shouldn't worry too much about it because you're growing, but even as you get older, there might be a time where maybe your doctor says, you know, you have enough fat tissue on your body that it's going to predispose you to certain health conditions, okay? Because sometimes if you have too much on your body, it can lead to type 2 diabetes, heart disease, like all that stuff I don't want you to have. Okay, so there is a reason that you might need to adjust your diet. But what I want you to know is I want you to just have a sustainable lifestyle with food and a good relationship with that food. Right? Because those diets, do you know why they don't work? Yeah, well, first of all, they're unhealthy, and like, how fun is it to not eat carbohydrates? Like, that's not very fun for me. Because food is fun, right? Like, who doesn't want birthday cake on their birthdays? And it's also, you don't want birthday cake? What do you like on your birthday? Ice cream? Hey man, ice cream's got carbohydrates in it, so I'd say keep eating it. But when you're following these diets, it's not sustainable because it's just not like a way that you can live for the rest of your life. Does that make sense? Because I don't want to cut out ice cream for my whole life or birthday cake. Okay, it's also tradition. I'm going to be making stuffing on Thursday, and I'm definitely going to eat like 3 plates of it. Okay? So it's like fun, it's tradition, it's culture, is what food is. And I want us to like think of it that way. It's not like a quick fix. There are no quick fixes. It's not get on a diet for a month and then you're good for the rest of your life. You got to make lasting changes, okay? And stay healthy for your entire life, okay? So I'm also curious, who's on social media? I think I know the answer to this. Okay. And you might remember me asking this if you saw my session before, but when you're on social media and you see like whoever you're following, whether it's like other athletes or just like influencers that you look up to for their cooking or their fashion or what have you, I know what I see because I'm a yoga instructor. I've been doing yoga for like 15 years. So when I see yoga on my social media, I see a lot of really, really thin women who were former gymnasts. Okay, so they got a leg up on me because they were former gymnasts, and they're all really thin. And then it made me think for a while, like maybe, you know, why don't I look like them, right? Do any of you have, like, if you're in sports, like when you see men on your timeline that you're following, like what are they promoting? What do they look like? They're huge and buff, and they're shredded, right? Really low body fat, and they're also huge. Sometimes it makes you feel like, why don't I look like that? We've all got different body types. It's kind of hard. So I just want you to know when you're thinking of like food, okay, use food to have fun, but to also fuel your bodies. And try not to worry about social media and those images that they're presenting, because that's not you and that's not your body, right? I think if you want to deadlift 225, you should still work towards it, okay? Or if you want to have a healthy body size, like work on that with a doctor or dietitian, right? But you don't need to be like following influencers and doing their cleanses and stuff to get there. Does that make sense? And I asked this in the last session. So can we just all agree here today to like love our bodies? Can we agree with that today? Like love our bodies and fuel them so you can take that test and get the high GPA and go off to college or trade school and just be successful and happy? Yeah? Can we agree to do that today? Okay. You say, huh? Okay, I was like, we're gonna have a talk afterwards.
Kelsey.
25? Okay. So, true or false? What do you think? You say true? He got me. So it is a trick. So I'm going to tell you false. A calorie is a calorie. Okay, so when you see 100 calories on this package and you look at a different package of food, you see 100 calories. They are the same, right? It's still energy. But the difference is going to be the source. So is it 100 calories of ice cream and birthday cake, or is it 100 calories of like that PB&J that we talked about? Okay, there's a difference in quality. Okay, that's the big thing. So quality is really important. And what I mean by that is when you're choosing foods to eat and you're choosing snacks, whether it's because you got a test that day, or you're just going to school, or you got a cross-country meet, football game, whatever it is, I want you to choose more high-quality foods, okay? So whole foods. So when I'm saying like whole foods, I'm talking like bananas, okay? I'm not talking about like banana-flavored foods, okay? Homemade foods. So like maybe your mom made a casserole or made a soup, okay? Maybe you want to pack that the next day, okay? And that's versus like frozen dinners, okay? So when you like go to the grocery store, there's a bunch of like, there's a huge frozen section and it kind of like overwhelms you and it all looks really yummy and great. I want you to choose this stuff more often. There's like preservatives in here and there's lots of sodium, which your body doesn't need to grow, okay? Now, what I was talking about with the guys earlier is that I also recognize that you all aren't making the grocery list and going to the grocery store, right? So it's really hard sometimes when you don't have that autonomy. But I tell you this because when you're older, very soon, and possibly in a few years, you might move out, you might go to college or just move out, right? So it's just important to know that you should aim for this more often than this. I mean, like Monday, I did make cheese-filled breadsticks. I won't lie to you, okay? But I also made lentil soup this week. So it's having a balance of that. So more often choosing things from here than this section. Does that make sense? Yeah. So I just want to show you, this is just the digestive tract. Is this new to anyone? Are we pretty familiar with that? Okay. So what I'm getting ready to focus on, though, is kind of the part that's doing more of the digesting, so like your stomach and your intestines. This might look really complicated. There's fancy words. Just ignore that for a second. Focus on the brain and just the gut here. So what we know is that there's actually a connection between our brain and our gut that's doing the digesting. Who's heard of the microbiome? Awesome. Kind of? Yeah? So the microbiome is the collection of all of the bacteria on your skin, in your mouth, and even in your gut and in your intestines, good and bad. So there's bacteria, you want a good balance of those, okay? And what we know is that what's going on in your gut and the bacteria is actually going to impact your brain, too. Who's heard of neurotransmitters? Awesome. Have you heard of serotonin? So serotonin is responsible for your mood and your brain. Did you know that 95% of your serotonin is produced in your gut? So if your gut's not functioning well, because your microbiome is off because of the quality of the foods that you've been eating, then your brain is also going to be off, okay? So that means like you might feel kind of like foggy during that test, like, man, I studied for this all week and I don't remember what it was. Or maybe during that game, your coach told you to do something and you didn't execute, or you're just not really playing as strategic as you would have, right? And then let's say
you're highly emotional and irritable.
Yes.
Like there's a reason the term hangry came about.
Yes. Yes.
Okay? So very powerful phrase. You are what you eat and feel the way you eat.
Yes. So that really impacts us, okay? And so who's heard of probiotics? You have. You have too. Okay, awesome. Anyone want to tell me what they are? That's fine. So probiotics are, have you seen like in the store, in like Walgreens, in the supplement section, it's like probiotic, it's like acidophilus, lactobacillus, and all these bacteria. So probiotics are basically, you're just buying the good bacteria and you eat it and then they stay in your gut. So the purpose is to support your microbiome, which is awesome. So there's also something called prebiotics. That's actually what feeds the probiotics and the gut. Okay, so that's what feeds the bacteria. Do you know where you're going to get prebiotics from? So the food for the bacteria? That's going to come from your fruits. It's going to come from your vegetables. It's going to come from your grains. Okay,
Fermented
so
foods.
fibers. Yes. So, you know how I talked about the quality of foods, eating those whole foods more often? So like opting for like a fruit smoothie, or when the training room gets opened, you know, that little food supply area that you got, like opting for some fruit, like that's gonna do a good job of feeding that bacteria. That frozen pizza, not so much, okay? Not that you shouldn't eat frozen pizza, because I like pizza rolls just as much as the next person. But eating those fresh foods more often is gonna help your bacteria. Now, who likes yogurt? Awesome. Did you know that there's probiotics in your yogurt? So yogurt's an awesome way to just add a boost of probiotics to your gut, which is going to be really beneficial for that brain. And also support your mood, like he talked about. Okay? Any questions on this? So there's a lot of research on this, but we still don't know enough, in my opinion. But what we do know is that food and the quality of your food does impact your gut, which does impact your brain. Okay, so we do know that. It also, this whole thing here, your gut, what you eat, is going to impact your immune pathway. So you know when you get sick quite often? I get sick more when I'm not eating well. So what you eat is going to impact your immune function and your body's ability to fight off stuff. It's also going to impact your hormones, which at this age it's hard because they're like raging right now. But this is really important for that. And then neural pathways just simply means kind of what I talked about with mood and the serotonin. Okay? I've made this point already. I aim for like 80% high quality food. You know that column? I aim for like 80% of that high quality, and the other part is going to be like the pizza rolls.
That's not
Okay,
us.
cool.
Sorry.
I was like, oh. Okay. So I'm curious, anyone like Mythbusters? Okay, I'm not too old then, okay. So let's say you're getting ready to go into school and you know you got a few tests in the morning and you know you're not gonna be able to have a snack, or you're getting ready to go into practice, or maybe you're getting ready to go into a game. Which of these is gonna be the better pre-fuel option? You think the cheeseburger is? What do you think? You think the cheeseburger? PB&J? Why? You tell me. So they both have protein. Okay, so we know that because you know there's peanut butter and there's grains, and then there's meat. There's also some cheese. But what do we learn about red meats? They're higher in fat, which isn't bad, okay? But do you want a cheeseburger just sitting there right before you run 3 miles in cross country? I don't. So this might be an option that's gonna digest a little bit quicker, okay? It's not gonna sit there as long. But what I'll tell you is, and I think this is on one of the upcoming slides, is if you know your body and you know that this cheeseburger is gonna digest in enough time for you, okay, maybe this would be okay, right? Because it's got protein, it's got carbohydrates. So the carbohydrates are gonna provide the fuel for your brain and your muscles, okay? But the fat in the protein, in the meat and the cheese, and also in the peanut butter is gonna keep you full longer so that you stay fueled, you know, for those few tests or even through the whole cross-country meet or the football game. Make sense? So my choice would be this one. But if you know your body and you know this works well for you, I think that's also okay, right? Okay, so you ran the cross-country meet, you had the football game, you finished the test, and it's snack time. What are we going for? Both? Anyone disagree with both? Great. So these are both really good options, all right? And I'll tell you why. So when you're done exercising or you've had a long day of using your brain, you need some carbohydrates and you need some more protein. Especially if you've been doing sports, that protein is gonna help you rebuild muscles and help you repair the muscles, okay? So we got protein on this side in the meat, we got carbohydrates in the bread, and then milk also has protein and plenty of carbohydrates. The milk's also great, especially if you've done sports, because it's a liquid, so you can kind of help start getting rehydrated too. Hydration's really important, and that's also in your handout. It talks about how much liquid you need and good sources of hydration for you. Okay? Any questions so far? Okay. So this is just kind of telling you what I explained, and it's got some other options that would be like good pre-whatever fuel. And then this is fueling your muscles. We talked about skeletal muscles. It's going to be really important. Also your brain, though. Biggest thing, though, is just experimenting, see what works. I feel like for me, I digest really slow. So when I was in cross country, I couldn't eat something 1 hour before. I had to eat something a couple hours prior, right? So know your body, because that's going to slow you down, too. If you eat a big meal and then your body's just focused on digesting that, it's not going to be super focused on running or even mentally.
So just for 1 second, Kelsey, I want to kind of like hammer a point home.
Yeah.
So think about bullet point, pretty much all those bullet points on the left, okay, right there. Friend, I want you to think of it from a perspective of not only like, for the, sport, practicing a sport, or actually executing a game, but also how about a workout where we're doing, like say, 1 rep max testing. Okay, something, it's the same concept. I often see people, they come into the weight room, they perform a hard workout, and they don't necessarily do as well as they anticipated on doing. And I ask questions like, well, when's the last time you ate? I didn't eat lunch today. It's 2 o'clock in the afternoon, or 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock. If you don't have any fuel in your body, when you're trying to demand it to do something, maximal effort at a high level, you're not going to execute that well, no matter what it is. Fiona, if it's dance, right? Think about how long those dance days are. If you're not fueling with the right stuff, you're probably not going to be executing well, right? So, in the right time frame as well, not just the right stuff, but the right time frame. Does that make sense?
So on that last slide, it talked about fueling. And you want to fuel about 1 to 4 hours before that game or that practice. Okay.
Or workout.
Exactly. And then for post-game or post-workout, refueling is good within like 60 minutes or so of that. Because I talked about that milk being a good sense of like hydration too. So you want to be rehydrating and refueling after exercise like
How
that.
many of you how many of you have practices for your respective sports? Raise your hand. Okay. How many of you are like raging starving after those things? Yeah, okay. There's a reason. That's a biomechanical marker that your body is saying, hey, I'm depleted. I need fuel. Give it to me. And that 60-minute window is really important because that's when your body really, we talk about rates of digestion, it's really, really wanting it. It's a fire and it's burning and it wants to burn harder.
And there's actually a lot of research articles on that 60 minutes. So there's a reason it's so specific, right? So that's like prime time, especially for gaining weight and gaining muscle, that 60 minutes. So making sure you get that protein within that 60-minute window is really important. So these are some resources because I'm not going to be here later for you, right? So you can always go to eatright.org. So the American Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, okay, that's like the big academy where dietitians register through to be licensed. So you can find lots of recipes on there, lots of good articles. And then myplate.org, you can actually determine how many servings of vegetables do I need? How many servings of fruit do I need each day? How many of grains? So it'll literally tell you for your physical activity level, your age, your height, your weight, how much you need, okay? All right, so here's where I want you to take out your phones. So if you can, scan this QR code. I'm going to give you a minute to do that.
Kelsey, you have about 6 minutes.
Perfect. Everyone got it that wanted it? Okay. Is this the one that pops up for you? Does it say Q&A on the QR code? What's the question it's asking? Oh, here. Okay, so for this one, I'm actually just curious if you have any questions. I know it says, like, what are your thoughts on counting calories and macros? I just want to know what's coming to mind. Comments, questions, anything that was confusing. And this makes it so it's anonymous, so feel free, you can just type it in and submit, and it should pop up on the screen. By I don't know, do you mean this is just a lot of information? So what I'll tell you is I showed you a few resources on the screen. Also in your handout, at the very end of the PowerPoint, is my email address. So if you have any questions after this presentation in the future, or maybe you went and talked to your mom about it, you're like, Mom, I need some yogurt because I need some probiotics. If you have any questions, or if your parents have any questions, you can feel free to email me anytime. Okay, what's the best protein breakfast? So if you had to ask me that, what I would ask you is, what are sources of protein that you like? Do you like yogurt? Do you like animal protein? You like to have chicken for breakfast? Are you like an egg person? Like this week, what I had been doing is roasted potatoes with some eggs. And then I did real eggs, and then another time I did tofu scrambled eggs. So I got protein, I got my carbohydrates for the morning. Are you like someone who likes bread stuff? You know what I mean? So there's all those things that can go into it. So feel free to add more to here if you want me to get more in depth on that. So Cliff Bars. So here are my thoughts on Cliff Bars. You know how we talked about high quality versus low quality food items? That Cliff Bar, it's not that it's low quality, it's just not like a whole food. It's a processed food item. So Cliff Bars aren't bad. They've got lots of protein in them, and also they're tasty. I used to eat those quite a bit. So just think about like what's accessible to you, okay? It's like, is the Cliff Bar just what your parents got for you this week, and that's what you told them you wanted? I'd say definitely. It's got protein in it, it's got carbohydrates, okay? But maybe sometimes try to swap that out with maybe that turkey sandwich or milk or something. So try to swap it out with maybe like a whole food item instead of just eating like the processed bars. Make sense? Not that it's bad, because I don't like to label food good or food bad, right? Sometimes convenience is really nice. Yes, all of this. And a lot of this is super individual. It's like how quickly do you digest food? How much did you eat that day? So that's really important, definitely. The best source of protein, well, for me as a vegetarian, I'm always eating tofu. I do like eggs occasionally. Rarely I'll have fish, but I do like fish. But protein is protein, it's just how much of it are you eating, okay? So chicken, beef, right? Now, a lot of that also goes down to like, how are you cooking it? So if it's fried chicken compared to like baked, can we agree like the baked is probably better, right? It's lower in fat, so it's a little bit better for us. So think about that, and if you have more questions, feel free to email me. So Pre-workout, I honestly feel at your age, you have plenty of energy. I don't think that you need pre-workout. But if you had a really rough night the morning before studying, I'd recommend change your study habits, first of all. But just kind of use it very, very sparingly. If you need some energy, I don't think at this age that you need a lot of caffeine, but like I had lattes in the morning when I was in high school. Like I'd rather you opt for like some green tea or something if you need like a caffeine boost, okay? Creatine and whey, again, these are processed foods, okay? So like think about what could I substitute that's more like a whole food item more often than not, okay? Not that they're bad, like whey's great if you digest it well. Some people just don't digest it well and it makes you like gassy and bloated.
You have to remember the word supplement comes from the actual term. It's supposed to supplement or support a good, healthy diet. Does that make sense to everybody?
That's a good point.
If you're missing those whole food type meals where you're really going for quality, then you're kind of you're stepping backwards instead of forwards, in my opinion.
And then for this one, what's the best food before lifting? This is going to go back to your the slide where I talked about pre-workout food options and about how like the 1 to 4 hour time window. So go back and look at that slide and it'll give you some ideas of like what would be good before I exercise. And just keep in mind that like your quantity might have to be adjusted, okay? When I lift, I can eat a little bit more food than I can if I'm gonna like go run 7 miles. Does that make sense? Like the type of activity is gonna depend on the quantity. But look at that slide for like some good ideas for like before you lift, okay? Awesome. So I hope this was helpful. Emails on the PowerPoint slide if you need it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.